Now, I realize we've been at this for some time already, but at the risk of derailing the dialogue you initiated, and may I just say how thrilled I am that you did, Karkat, I would just like qualify my entire analysis of your Alternian culture by saying that in contrast with life on before us, while your people may have been engaged in violent, lethal class struggle for millions of sweeps, by no means does this imply that the before-and way of life was entirely without problematic elements, perhaps even more disturbing and insidious for their lack of acknowledgement and open discussion, particularly as a consequence of what in my view were widely and dismayingly unexamined systematic social injustices resulting from the entrenched power dynamics in play, dynamics strikingly similar to those of your planet's markedly more bellicose iteration, which has only served to fully vindicate my hypothesis that such a hierarchy is really predicted on interistic dysfunction, as a failure to shift all the usual narratives and undiagnosed problems into the open, judgment-free discourse through which problematic issues are constructively channeled into more intelligently problematized avenues of discussion. Now, before I continue, it is only decent of me to warn you about certain triggers that are surely ahead in this essay, conversation. Triggers include, but likely will not be limited to, class opposition, calling culture, and violence against grubs, lessons abuse, complimentary and angleless hate speech, pail filling, slurries, and other consequence and fluids, lifespan shaming, ableist slurs, prolix dissertation. Actually, maybe it would be easier for you to list your triggers, and I'll do my best to avoid those topics, or navigate them more delicately, if all possible. Trigger warning, opposition, calling, grub, violence, lessons abuse, hemophobia, pails, slurries. Great, it sounds like you don't have any triggers. At least none that you know about. I'll proceed with caution, nevertheless. Just please let me know if you start feeling triggered by anything I'm saying, and we can take a brief time out while you summon your Moirail to help pacify you, assuming you have one. Not that I'm presuming you do, but I heard that you did. Is that correct? If not, I apologize. I further apologize if your orientation precludes the possibility as a pale aromatic. Pan-quadrant diaromatic, something in the gray pale sexual department or such, and hopefully you're not triggered by such presuminous affirmative language. It wouldn't be the first time I was guilty of such an inexcusable microaggression, and I'm not so oblivious to my own romantic privilege to believe it would be the last time either. Calamity, microaggressions, rom privilege, reciprocal Moirails. I'm glad I brought up the subject of unexamined privilege, because it dovetails beautifully with the point I was about to make regarding beforehand society and its savage umbral potentiality which later manifested through the kind of Alternian brutality you are all too familiar with. Those in the higher echelons of the hemispectrum, such as the Surlans, or Blue Bloods, careful being loose with such terminologies, opening the floodgates to a whole host of toxic signist language and homophobic slurs. While addressing on the challenges faced by those lower on the spectrum, such as midhues or in particular warm case like umbers, archers, or rustbloods, another slur, highly problematic, deeply offensive and triggering terminology, strongly imploring you steer clear of this term. They would be well advised to check their Surlian privilege, particularly before dismissing hardships or merging claims of opposition, which will be difficult for them to identify or empathize with from their indigenous position with the beforehand Alternian power structures. Dovetail problematic power structures, toxicinous language. And some may argue that in our peaceful utopian culture that we have freed ourselves from injustice and disparities in privilege and post-secondary economy, largely equal rights distributed across the hemospectrum, and therefore exist in a post-spectral world, laugh out loud, and therefore there is no need to champion important social causes, and there is nothing left to debate. But really nothing could be further from the truth. You only need to educate yourself and carefully investigate the long-standing power dynamics in play. For instance, a seemingly harmless remark from a cis-blooded Surlian towards an Umber or, God forbidden, a Burgundy, or yes, even a warm-identified, physically cooler caste, about their very long-term future plans, such as on the order of centuries, then this may prove to be a very hurtful microaggression due to the fact that low hues cannot possibly live that long themselves, and the more privileged case can more easily outlive dozens of generations of mid-hues or hundreds of generations of boys. Burgundy, umber, yellow-greens. Note, please avoid describing the lattermost as limebloods, as it has historically been used as an especially vicious epithet. Such remarks can further trigger painful reminders of how cooler case to some extent 9 BGs, but sips and royal V's in particular, that have been able to use their tremendous lifespans over the millennia to gain a stranglehold over the social order, have been able to completely dictate our social evolution by ensnaring only their cultural agendas and narratives, receive the dialogue's air supplies, assuring the condition of those reluctant ideals and deciding what normalcy entails. And sadly, those absolutes become internalized across the full spectral range, even within those of compromised privilege. And so you begin to see the social nature of the dysfunction and the resulting inertia against positive change and raising awareness of those most under-problematized issues, which I think we can agree is pretty problematic. Post-spectral world, lol, boys, PGAs, SIPs, royal narratives, agendas, narratives. And really, it's everyone's business to examine their privilege, even Burgundies, who may be subject to the pitfall of believing incorrectly that there are none on the scale beneath them whom they enjoy certain privileges over, which off-spectrum trolls will never know, such as identifying as otherbloods or caste multiples, polyblooded. Any who hemophobically ID as having a case with manifests nowhere, as yet known, in anyone physically, or for that matter, off-specs who physically do possess such a blood type, or mutants, a very problematic term, highly triggering to some, be warned, such as you and I, Karkat. But this puts us both in a position to our knowledge uniquely allows to understand and emphasize with tragically underprivileged and unempowering groups across all scales of life, thus affording us both what I'd like to call uniquely underprivileged privilege, which, yes, is the kind of privilege that we can both strive to check as well, whenever we can. The same uniquely underprivileged perspective, I'm sure you know, was disadvantaged upon by post-scratch iteration as well. And while I have no doubt that you just finally came to revert that figure of your planet's rich history and your personal lineage, and while his goals of peace, equality, and a truly spectrum-blind society, I'm afraid I personally have trouble conditioning his methods. I don't like to use the term problematic lightly. But his tactics were nothing if not massively problematic, to say the least, employing violent uprising to effect change, and emblazing upon his mark upon history and his faithful followers with the salty flourish of a single rude, shouted swear word. It's not to my taste, even though he is who I would have grown up to be in another life. But no, I prefer to effect social change through rational, honest discourse and contributing to ongoing dialogues, focusing on what should be the real goals, through what adheres to the discipline of problematics, ensuring that we stay focused on successfully problematizing a wide range of direly uncomplicated social dilemmas, under complication, salty flourish, rude, shouted swear word, spectrum-blind society. It's nice to see we agree on so much. Maybe we're not so unlike, despite our drastically different upbringings. Anyway, as I was saying, the story of our ancestor, and more importantly, my exhaustive list of misgivings with his approach of social change, is quite a long and elaborate one, but fits brilliantly within the larger mosaic which captures the broad strikes of my post. I mean our discussion. Trigger warnings for the following content include ancestor bashing, faith shaming, loud swearing, torture, burnward, ship sinking. Again, seriously, just let me know if you begin to feel triggered by anything, even slightly. We pause and see if we can really explore those issues and identify exactly how I may have unvalidated our struggles. Without further ado, the stories as goes. Bip, bip, bip.